Conditions May Apply by CinnamonPinecones. Read by Distracted by Books. Chapter 33. Mother trucker, dude, that hurt like a butt cheek on a stick. By the time Monday rolled around, Izuku was just about losing his mind. He hadn't talked to anyone but DJ in nearly a whole week, and he hadn't been able to run at all. Getting actual food in him did wonders for his ability to not sleep for most of the day, but that only made him more stir-crazy. He'd been well enough to practice throwing knives for a few days, but that's all he could do. He'd pace around the building throwing knives in an attempt to stop himself from going too far. He knew he needed to let it rest, but it was becoming increasingly more difficult by the day. He told himself Monday. He could stay here until Monday. He reeked to high heaven, and he needed to at least go to school and get a shower, and assuming another catastrophe didn't strike, he should be fine to go on patrol too. The burn was far from fully healed, but it was to the point where the pain wasn't debilitating, and it would probably do it good to move around while it healed, so the scar didn't heal too firmly in a resting position. He didn't want to deal with feeling his skin pull every time he lifted his arms for the rest of his life because of this. Regardless of whether it was medically recommended, he was going to go insane if he stayed cooped up for much longer. The second his alarm went off, he got dressed, scooped up the bag carrying everything he would need to shower, clean and redress the wound, and bolted out the door. This shower was going to take longer than it usually did, both because it had been over a week since he had last properly bathed and because of the burn. He got to the gate a few minutes before it opened and headed straight for the shower. The stream of water felt both heavenly and agonizing. Washing the built-up grime from his skin made him feel like he was a new man, but the process took long enough that the water had heated enough to irritate the burn. Reluctantly, he finished up and dried off. He wrapped his towel around himself and headed to a bathroom stall to dress the burn because he really didn't need anyone walking in on that. When he entered the classroom, no one commented on his absence. Nothing had changed. It was like he never left. The teacher wordlessly handed him a stack of work he needed to catch up on, and he took a seat at his desk. He spent his day half listening to the teacher and half working through his missing assignments. Filtering through everything, he's pretty sure he got the hang of most of it, but he might have to look up some stuff at the library tomorrow to make sure. He was counting the minutes, waiting for school to let out. He was itching to check in on Uptown, to verify with his own two eyes that everything hadn't gone to shit in his absence. But the seconds were dragging on into eternities, and Kachan would not stop staring at him. It was uncomfortable. He couldn't place the emotion behind his eyes, and he wasn't about to ask. Hopefully, he would get over whatever guilt or concern or whatever the hell he was feeling by tomorrow, because it felt like he was going to start boring holes into Izuku's skin with that glare. Deku had been gone for nearly a whole week, but Katsuki had yet to hear a word about his condition or any sort of punishment, and it was starting to become difficult to deny his worry. Worry about his consequences, of course, not for Deku. Why the hell would he be worried about stupid Deku? He was considering ways to ask the teacher or something about him without rousing suspicion when Monday morning rolls around and Deku just strolls into the class like nothing happened. The ever-present bags under his eyes looked a little worse, but other than that, he just looked normal. Weakling probably got healed up by some fancy quirk and spent the week being waited on by Auntie. Kami, he spent the whole week being worried, not worried, over nothing. The idiot was fine. Maybe that'd teach him not to get in Katsuki's way again. Izuku got dressed for patrol the moment he got home and texted Eraserhead that he should expect him back tonight, despite the fact that he wouldn't be heading out for another few hours. He used that time to practice with his throwing knives a bit and scaled the walls up to the roof by the dumpster over and over again. It hurt, but it was manageable. He would be fine. When DJ got fed up with his noise making and yowled at him, he decided it was close enough to when he would usually leave, and he could just take a bit longer of a route to their normal meetup spot. Even though they took the long way around, they still ended up 15 minutes early. But Eraser was already sitting there with his customary nutrient pouch. He eyed them up and down before tossing them one. Yes, liquid gold. These things saved his ass last week. Thanks, Eraser, he said with some snark, even though he meant it genuinely. Mm-hmm, he replied in his usual monotone drawl. Everything all right with the family emergency? Was this small talk, or did he actually want to know? They studied his face to look for an answer, but his expression was as flat as his tone. Yeah, it's all fine now. Anything burned down while I was gone? They asked in return. Eraser did say he'd tell him if anything went wrong, but they still needed that confirmation. Not as far as I know. The ladies have been asking where you were, though. Word's gotten around about your sabbatical, but nothing's come of it yet. That was concerning. Well, it's a good thing I'm back then, they replied with a smirk. You haven't gotten rusty while you were gone, have you? Eraser asked with a sadistic smile as he tossed him one of the blunted practice knives. Well, shit. Looks like they're going to be working on their defensive moves today. Course not. Can you still keep up, old man? They shot back with false confidence. Their spars ended as usual, with Eraser winning, but it was good practice to work on their defensive skills, so it wasn't a complete loss. They were definitely tiring faster than they normally did, but they hoped he wouldn't notice. They had made sure the burn was dressed extra securely before they left, so the bandaging wasn't dragging on it, but it still hurt as the skin stretched and moved with them. It hurt, but it felt so much better to finally be moving again. The sun set quickly, and before they knew it, it was time to start patrol. It was a Monday, so it should be pretty slow going, but they weren't about to let their guard down. The minutes trickled into hours, and very little of note happened. They stopped some muggings, helped some people home, and broke up a drug deal. It was going too smoothly, so Ivy wasn't surprised when it went south. They were intercepting the second drug deal of the night when Ivy was knocked to the ground. It would have been fine, but the man they were fighting stomped down on their ribs to pin them down. Any other place and in any other situation, it would have been fine, but of course, the man's heel hit dead center on the burn. It hurt for a moment, and they couldn't help but let out a yelp. They were about to punch or slash the back of the man's knee, do anything to get that awful pressure off of them, when all of a sudden their vision whited out and the pain became unbearable. It was like nothing they had ever experienced before. It hurt more than when he was initially burned. It hurt more than when he had to clean it. It hurt more than what his father did to him all those years ago. They were screaming. They knew they were screaming, but they couldn't stop themselves. Through the roaring in their ears, they faintly heard Eraser shout out to them, and suddenly the pain was diminished. It wasn't gone, but it was lessened. It was bearable. Quickly, they took their knife and buried it in the back of the man's calf, and he went careening to the ground. His head hit the pavement, and he stopped moving. It must have been a quirk that magnified the pain. Even though it was gone, their mind was still reeling from it. Commie. They were going to be sick. They could hear Eraser running up behind them, but they were not about to vomit into their mask. They held up one hand behind them, attempting to signal to Eraser to stay back. and dragged themselves as far as they could before ripping the mask off and spewing up their meager lunch on the side of the dirty alley. Putting the mask back on in place as quickly as they could, they took a moment to collect themselves, lying on the ground panting with their eyes closed and the sour taste of bile lingering in their mouth. Before they were coherent again, Eraser was at their side saying something and running a hand over the spot the man had just dug his heel into. "God, get off!" they groaned out, slapping his hands away. They finally tuned into their surroundings as Eraserhead was talking and trying to probe their ribs again. They only caught the last half of his sentence. "Need to make sure you're okay," he said, half annoyed, half concerned. "I'm fine," they grumbled, slapping the hand away a second time. "The hell you mean you're fine? You just screamed like you were being tortured, stabbed a guy, and threw up. Let me see." Ivy cut him off. "It was a quirk. He's got a pain quirk or something. It stopped when you looked at him. Is he okay?" they asked as they pushed Eraserhead out of the way to check on the man lying prone on the ground. Their limbs still felt a little disconnected after that, so it took them a moment to stumble to their feet, but the man appeared to be fine. He was breathing, and where he hit his head wasn't bleeding too much, so he should be all right. He did, however, have one of Ivy's knives buried in his calf. "Of course you're checking him over before yourself," he heard Eraser mumble under his breath before speaking up. I'm calling an ambulance. Either they're going to check you over or I am." Ivy was getting deja vu. That's the same damn trick the gym teacher tried to use on them when he first got burned. "Stop coercing me into taking my shirt off, Eraser. It's not a good look for you," they quipped back. They could swear they could see his eye twitch in the low light before he spoke. "Ivy, go walk 2 blocks that way and sit down. I will meet you there when this is dealt with. Do not go any further. Understood?" Oh, he was angry. His tone left no room for debate, so Ivy just raised their hands in mock surrender and walked theatrically slow out of the alley and in the direction Eraser pointed. They could hear him start talking to an operator as they turned the corner. As they sat in an alley 2 blocks away, their body returned to its normal function. Their mind no longer felt like soup that had just been vigorously stirred, and they were getting bored. Why the hell did they even listen to Eraser? Sirens had raced to the scene like 15 minutes ago. He was taking forever. They'd gotten up and started pacing and were considering just continuing patrol despite Eraser's command when the man himself rounded the corner. Upon seeing them, he stopped and took a deep breath. "I told you to sit down, Ivy," he reprimanded as he approached. "You were taking forever. Be glad I even waited for you." "Let's go," they said, turning on their heel and preparing to scale the wall to get back on the rooftops. "Ivy, stop," Eraser commanded again before resting a firm hand on their shoulder. They quickly turned around and wrenched their shoulder out of his grasp. "Quit touching me. I'm fine," they spat back. "If you keep running around with a possibly broken rib, you could end up with a punctured lung," he warned. "Just let me check and we can—" "I know what a broken rib feels like, Eraser. It's not broken. I'm fine now. Stop fretting over me like a worried housewife," they interrupted. Eraser took another deep breath and looked them over one more time before he relented. "Okay, fine. Just let me know if it gets worse. I've got a friend with a healing quirk, and she can be discreet. She won't ask questions," he replied. "Oh, that could be really helpful, but not right now. They were already on the mend. The risk of infection was decreasing by the day, but that was something to keep in mind. Thanks. I'll let you know if I ever need that, they said, scaling the wall before Eraser could argue any more. End of chapter.